Hi, welcome to the video Spring Data JPA Composite Primary Key Examples with me Nam Hà Minh from code.java.net. In this video, I'd like to share with you why Composite Primary Key and how to map Composite Primary Key in Spring Data JPA using ID class, embeddable, and embedded ID annotations. And you will also learn about mapping Composite Primary Key that has foreign keys. And in the next few minutes, I'll show you some code examples in a Java Maven project based on the following technologies: Spring Boot, Spring Data JPA with Hibernate ORM, MySQL, JDBC driver, and the software programs I used are Java Development Kit, JDK, MySQL Server, and MySQL Workbench, and Spring Tools with IDE. So why composite primary key? A composite primary key is a primary key that contains more than one column, and when its values combined together, uniquely identify rows in the table. Let's see a couple of examples. You see, in the airports table, it has a composite primary key that consists of two columns, country code and city code. That means the values of these two columns, country code and city code, uniquely identify rows in the table. And similarly, the phone context table has a composite primary key that consists of the columns, area code, and number. The values of these two columns uniquely identify rows in the phone context table. So, using composite primary key, no separate numeric primary key is needed as usual. Thus, reduce the data needs to be stored in the database as the columns in the composite key are parts of the table. You see, this is a Java Maven project for a Spring Boot application. You see, this is a Maven project file, and the main dependencies I used are Spring Data JPA and MySQL connector J, which is the JDBC driver. And this is the application properties file in which I define the properties for data source, URL, username, password, and some properties for Hibernate. You see, and the database schema is testdb on localhost. And you see MySQL Workbench, and I have the testdb database schema. It has no tables at the moment. Now, I'm going to show you how to implement Composite Primary Key Mapping using the ID class annotation provided by Spring Data JPA. Suppose that we need to map the Composite Primary Key like this in the table airports. This Composite Primary Key consists of two columns, country code and city code. So in Java code, we need to code class, a kind of class called ID class like this. It must implement the serializable interface and defines the fields that map to the columns in the composite primary key, and also implement getters and setters, override, equals, and hash code method. And in the entity class, we just specify the ID class using the ID class annotation like this, you see. And also we need to redefine the fields mapping here. Okay, let me write the code. So I create a new class here, airport ID, in the package airport net.codejava.airport, and have this class implement the serializable interface from the package java.io. Okay, and then define two fields that map with the two columns in the composite primary key, country code and city code. Country code and city code, and generate getters and setters Okay, and also generate equals and hash code method. Okay, so just see the ID class that represents a composite ID field in Java, and then code the entity class import using JPA annotations entity table and specify the mapping table name is imports, and we need to redefine the columns in the composite ID field, and we use the column annotation here and ID annotation. Okay, I use the column annotation to specify the maximum length of country code is 3 and city code maximum length is 4. Okay, and then name. Okay, and now in the class I specify the type of the ID class using the ID class annotation, and the ID class here import ID dot class. So you see it is quite simple, and generate getters and setters. Okay, and also generate equals and hash code based on country code and city code. Okay, so this is the code of the entity class, this is the code of the ID class. Okay, and then for Spring Data JPA we need to code a repository interface, import repository that extends the CRUD repository interface or JPA repository interface, and the type of the entity is import. The type of the ID is now import ID, you see. Okay, and for testing I code a unit test class here, import repository test using Spring Data JPA test, and I want to use a real database, so I override the blessed attribute here to none. Okay, and use rollback equal false to keep the data in the database, and I also write an instance of the airport repository interface, report, and the first test method test list all. Okay, just leave the test empty now and run this test method. So Hibernate will generate the tables based on the entity class defined here. Okay, you see now in the in the database the test DB schema is empty, no tables. And now let me run this test method. Okay, now in the console you can see it executed the SQL statement to create the table imports, city code, country code, and you can see the primary key is the composite key that consists of city code and country code. Let me check the database to verify. Refresh all, and you see the new table imports got created here on the table, and you can see the columns city code and country code are parts of the composite primary key, and you can see here primary key contains city code and country code columns, and the data in the table is empty. Now let me write a unit test method that persists an airport object into the database. Test set new. So I create a new airport object. Airport equal new airport, and set the values for the fields. Set city code Han, set country code VN, and set airport name. Set name Nội Bài International Airport. Okay, and then use the repository to persist this object. Report.save airport. Saved airport, and we assert that the saved airport object is not null. And also we compare the values of the composite ID field, city code and country code. Assert that saved airport get country code is equal to VN, and assert that saved airport get city code is equal to Han. Okay, and run this test method. You see the test is successful, and you see it executed the insert SQL statement here to insert a new row into the airports table. And let me check the table airports here, and you see a new row got inserted with the values city code, country code, and name here. Okay, and then I update the first test method that lists all airports. So write the code like this: file airports, and we assert that airports is not empty, and then we use for each to print each object in the collection using lambda expression. So in the airport class, we need to override the toString method. toString. Okay, and then run the test list or. Okay, successful, and you can see it prints the values of the fields in the airport object file in the database. Yeah. Okay, and let me code another test method that performs a query file by ID. Test file by ID. Because the ID we specify the type of the ID is airport ID here, so we define the ID object like this: airport ID equal new airport ID, and we set country code, city code, set country code VM, and we call repo file by ID and pass the ID object, and it returns an optional object of Thai airport result, and we assert that result is present. Okay, if I run this test method now, it should fail because no airport with the country code VM in the database. Run as unit test, and you see it should fail. You see the test fail. You see it executed the select query here. Now let me update the country code to VN, and now the test should pass. Okay, done. You see, successful. So that's the first way of mapping composite primary key in Spring Data JPA using the ID class annotation. You see. Next, let's see how to implement composite primary key mapping using the embeddable and embedded ID annotations. Suppose that we need to map the phone context table like this in Java. You see this table has the composite and primary keys that consist of two columns, area code and number. So in Java code, we need to write the ID class like this using the embeddable annotation. And we specify the field mapping right inside the ID class using the column annotations like this. The two fields map with the two columns in the composite primary key in the table. And then in the entity class, we refer to the ID class using the embedded ID annotation like this. Okay, now let me write the code. New class in another package net.code java.phone, and the class name is phone ID, and its super interface should be serializable interface. Finished. Okay, then we use the embeddable annotation for the ID class, and then we define the mapping field, area code of type integer area code, and number of type string. Generate getters and setters, and generate equals and hash code. Okay, and use the column annotation here, and specify the name is area underscore code, and for the column number here, specify the maximum length is 15 characters. And we need to generate constructor using fields, and also the ID class must have a no argument constructor like this. Okay, and then we code the entity class phone that maps with the phone context table in the database using entity annotation, table annotation. Table name is phone underscore context, and here we refer to the ID column phone ID using the embedded ID annotation. You see, and then we have mapping for normal columns. First name, null equal false, maximum length is 20, and last name. Okay, and generate getters and setters, generate equals and hash code based on ID field. Okay, and then for Spring Data JPA, we need to write to define the repository interface phone repository. It extends JPA repository. The type of the entity is phone, and the type of the ID is now phone ID. You see. Okay, and for testing, I code another unit test class here. Phone repository test. It is the Spring Data JPA test. So I copy some common annotations here into the test class, and I auto-wire an instance of phone repository report, and the first test method list all, test list all, and just run an empty test for now to let Hibernate create the tables based on the entity declaration here, phone and phone ID. You see. So I run this test. Okay, now you see it executed the SQL create table statement to make the create the table phone context, and you can see its primary key is the composite primary key that consists of two columns, area code and number. Let me check MySQL Workbench. Refresh all, and you can see the new table of phone context got created here. And now you can see its columns, area code and number are part of a composite primary key. You can see primary key, area code and number here. And let me select rows from this table. Of course, it should be empty. Okay, so far so good. Now let me write another test method to proceed a phone object into the database. Test save new. Okay, firstly I need to define the ID, phone ID, area code 1 and phone number 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, and then define a phone object, phone contact equal new phone. And set the values for first name and last name, John. Callison. And use the repo save method to proceed the object contact. Saved contact. And then we assert that saved contact is not for simplicity. Just assert that it is not now. Okay, and run the test method. You see we got an error. Let me check. We need to set ID for the phone contact object. Sorry, contact set ID. Yeah. Okay, run again. Okay, now it is successful, and you can see it executed the SQL insert statement. Insert a new row into the phone contacts table. Let me check. Okay, you see now we've got new row inserted into the phone contacts table, area code, number, first name, last name. Okay, let me code another test method that performs a query file by ID. Test file by ID. So I define the ID object like this, and then call repo file by ID. It returns an optional object of type phone result, and we just assert that result is present. And let me change the error code to number 2, and the test should fail, right? Because in the database no contact has error code ID 2. As you can see here, error code is 1. So I change back to 1 here and run the test again, and it should pass. Okay, successful. And let me update the code in the test list all method here, repo file o contacts, and assert that contacts is not empty. The contacts collection is not empty. And context for each, we print out the content of each contact object in the collection. So for readability, we need to override the toString method in the phone class here, and we also need to override the toString method in the ID class. Okay, and then run the test list all. Here. Okay, you see, successful, and it prints the values of the fields of the only one object phone here. Error code number, first name, last name. So that's the second way that can be used to implement composite primary key mapping using the embeddable and embedded ID annotation. Embeddable annotation here and embedded ID annotation here, you see. Next, let's see how to implement composite primary key mapping that has foreign keys. Suppose that we have the products and the orders table, and the order details table realize the many-to-many entity relationship between products and orders, and it has the composite primary key that consists of two foreign keys. The first one refers to the primary key in the products table, and the second one refers to the primary key in the orders table. And in the database, I already have the products table here, products table, and orders table here. You see, and in Java code, I already code the entity class product that maps to the products table in the database. It is usual, you see, ID, name, price, and this is the order entity class that maps to the orders table in the database. It is usual, you see. Okay, now we need to write Java code to map the composite primary key that has foreign keys in the order details. Okay, so I code a new class, ID class here, order detail ID, that implements the serializable interface. Finish. Okay, and we use the embeddable annotation. And in Java code, Java code in the ID class. We use the JPA annotations for foreign key mapping as usual, many to one and join column as you can see here. And in the entity class order detail, we refer to the ID class using the embedded ID annotation. Okay, so here we define the column field mapping, which is a reference to a product and order, and using the many to one annotation, and join column is product underscore ID, and similarly for the order reference order. Okay, and then we generate getters and setters. Name. Okay, and for the ID class, we also need to override hash code and equals. Okay, because the field product and other type objects, so make sure that you also override equals and hash code in the product class and other class as well. You see. Okay, so this is the code of the order detail ID class. This is the ID class, and then we code the entity class order detail using entity annotation, table annotation. Table name is order underscore details, and then we refer to the composite ID field here, order detail ID using the embedded ID annotation. Okay, and then we have the field quantity and unit price and subtotal. Okay, generate letters and setter methods, and generate hash code and equals based on ID field, and generate to string. Okay, so in the ID class here I also generate override to string. Okay, also in the product I override to string in order I override to string method. Okay, so this is the code of the order entity class. Okay, now let me write a unit test class here. Order detail. Sorry, we need to code the interface first. Interface order detail repository. Order detail repository, and it extends the JPA repository. The type of the entity is order detail, and the type of the ID is order detail ID. You see. Okay, and then code unit test class order detail repository test. This is a Spring Data JPA test. So I copy some common annotations, and here we need to have auto-wide reference of some repositories, phone repository, phone report, and other repository, other report, and other detail repository. detail report. And the first test method, test list. Oh, it is just empty for now. And now let me run this empty test to let Hibernate create the other details table. Run as JUnit test. Okay, you see it executed the SQL create table statement to create the table order details. And you see its primary key is the composite key that consists of order ID and product ID, which are foreign keys to the products table and orders table. Let me check in MySQL Workbench. Right here. Okay, you see the other details table got created here. And you see it has the composite and primary key that consists of two front keys, product ID and order ID. Front keys, and you can see here product ID and order ID. Very good, right? Okay, come back to the project, and now let me code a unit test method that persists a product, an order, and another detail into the database. Test save new, and I create a new product object. Product equal new product. Set name iPhone 15. Set price 1000. And I proceed this product object using the product repo. Sorry, this should be a product repository. My mistake. Very sorry. Product repository. Product repo. Save product. And then I create a new order object. Order equal new order. And set customer name. Ming. Set status in progress. Okay, and then I use the order repo to proceed this order object. Order repo save order. Okay, and then I create a new order detail ID. Order detail ID equal new order detail ID. Order detail ID. Set order object and set reference to product object. Product. Okay, and create new order detail object. Order detail equal new order detail. Order detail set set ID. Sorry. Order detail set ID, which is order detail ID object. Order detail set quantity 1, quantity 2. Set unit price 1000. Set subtotal 2000. Okay, and then proceed this order detail object using the order detail repo. Detail repo save order detail. Saved order detail. And for the simplicity of assertion, we just assert that save order detail object is not now. Okay, now let me run this test method. We got an error. Let me check. Field ID doesn't have a default value. Let me check the orders table here. Oh, somehow the auto increment column is not checked, so we need to check. Let me check the we need to delete the order details table. Drop order details. Okay. And onto the order table here to make the primary key column auto increment. Okay, so need to check the products table. Okay, here check the auto increment column for the primary key. We need to drop the order details table first. Drop. Okay, onto the products table. Okay, I think this time it should pass. I'll run the test again. Okay, successful. Okay, let me check in the products table here. One row inserted. In the orders table here, one row inserted. And in the order details table here, one row inserted. You can see the values for the composite primary key, product ID and order ID. Yeah, one. So that's how to implement a composite primary key mapping, which has foreign keys. You just use the JPA annotations for in the ID class. Normally you see many to one right column, many to one right column here. Okay, so that you have learned how to implement composite primary key mapping in Spring Data JPA. Note that the requirements for the ID class are the ID class must be public. It must implement the serializable interface. It must have a no argument constructor, and it must override equals and hash code methods. I hope you found this video helpful. Please subscribe to my channel, like, comment, and share this video. Thanks for watching.